The bolt cutters snapped through my private gate chain just as I rounded the curve above Mercer Lake. The sound cracked across the water. Cynthia Vale stood beside the severed chain in a cream blazer and polished riding boots, directing two men in gray security uniforms while a contractor stretched temporary fencing across my eastern boat ramp. Red survey flags stabbed the shoreline every 20 feet. A white sign had already been bolted to the gatepost. Silver Pines Community Reservoir. Authorized residents only. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. That ramp was how I reached the workboat, inspected the shoreline, and handled emergencies at the dam. My father had stood on that same concrete slab with me hundreds of times. Cynthia was treating it like an amenity she had forgotten to list in a sales brochure. She had also planted one of her flags inches from the old brass survey medallion embedded beside the ramp. That was her first mistake. I stopped my truck far enough back to keep everyone in frame, set my phone on the dashboard, and started recording before I opened the door. Diesel exhaust drifted over the cold lake. A cordless drill whined against metal. Cynthia watched the new padlock click shut, then turned toward me with the satisfied smile of someone unveiling a finished project. "Mr. Mercer," she called. "You're earlier than expected. You cut my chain. We secured community property." One guard stepped between me and the ramp. He held a clipboard against his chest, as if cardboard could change a property line. I looked past him. My workboat sat below us, tied where I had left it the night before. One contractor was photographing the ignition panel. Another had placed orange cones around the path to the dam control shed. Cynthia followed my eyes. "You'll need to surrender the keys to the boat, the ramp, and all water control facilities within 72 hours. She lifted a laminated packet from beneath her arm. "Maintenance logs, insurance records, and any commercial agreements involving the lake must be included." 600 acres, I said. "You're claiming all of it?" "The HOA is confirming possession of parcel 18B. She said it smoothly. Too smoothly. I had seen that number before, but never attached to Mercer Lake. Cynthia held out the packet. Her perfume reached me before the paper did, sharp citrus over something powdery. The first page carried the Silver Pines seal and a bold heading. "Notice 2, surrender community asset." I did not take it. "Put it on the hood." Her smile thinned. "This is not a negotiation." I didn't say it was. The contractor nearest the medallion lowered a steel pry bar toward its rim. "Don't touch that marker." Every head turned. Cynthia glanced down at the dull brass disc, no bigger than a silver dollar. "That obsolete survey piece is inside the community boundary. Then you won't mind leaving it where it is." For the first time, she paused. It lasted less than a second, but I caught it. So did my camera. She motioned the contractor away. "You have 72 hours, Daniel. After that, our attorneys will seek emergency enforcement, and security will assume full operational control." I photographed the notice, the cut chain, every vehicle, every face, and every flag. Then I asked each man for his name and employer. Cynthia laughed softly. "You really think pictures are going to save you?" "No," I said. "I think details might." A black SUV rolled down the gravel road behind her. Then another. Then a white pickup carrying more fencing. The first SUV stopped, and 4 Silver Pines board members stepped out holding identical folders. Cynthia turned toward them. "Good," she said. "Once the western gate is secured, the lake is ours." The board members spread across the ramp like they had rehearsed it. Cynthia handed each of them a copy of the surrender notice while the contractors kept working behind her. One man unrolled another sign. Another measured the width of my access road. Nobody asked who owned the land beneath their boots. I stayed beside my truck and photographed every page they carried. "Daniel," Cynthia said, lowering her voice, "you're making this harder than it needs to be." A woman from the board stepped forward and pointed toward the lake. "We've paid dues for this water for years." "No," I said. "You've paid dues to Silver Pines." The distinction landed badly. Phones came out. A man I recognized from the eastern shoreline began recording me while Cynthia told the group I was threatening to close recreational access and interfere with the neighborhood's water security. By the time I drove away, 3 residents had blocked my number, 2 had left angry messages, and the HOA had posted a photograph of my truck beneath the words "community access dispute." They were building a public story before they built a legal one. I drove straight to the lake office and locked the door behind me. The room still smelled faintly of cedar dust and machine oil. My father's yellow rain jacket hung beside the filing cabinet, one sleeve folded inward where his hand used to catch it. I pulled the surrender packet from the hood of my truck and laid it beneath the desk lamp. Parcel 18B appeared 7 times. Mercer Lake appeared 9. The two names were treated as if they had always meant the same thing. I opened the lower cabinet and pulled out the tax folders my father had arranged by year. He had labeled everything in block letters, straight and narrow, the way he marked survey stakes. The newest statement listed the owner as Mercer Basin Land Trust. I read it twice. Then I called James Whitaker at Piedmont Heritage Trust Company. "This is Daniel Mercer. Has anyone contacted you about transferring the lake?" Silence filled the line, followed by the click of a keyboard. "No," he said, "and no trust asset can be conveyed by one trustee alone." I looked back at Cynthia's packet. Her attached deed showed one signature. My father's. James asked me to email every page. I scanned the packet, the cut chain photographs, the security vehicles, and the new signs. Then I called Hannah Cole, a property attorney whose number my father had written inside the tax folder. By noon, the HOA pressure changed shape. A certified notice arrived by courier accusing me of obstructing a board-authorized inspection. An email followed, warning residents that I might manipulate the dam controls. Then a contractor called, asking when I planned to release the maintenance files purchased with the reservoir. Purchased. That word stopped me. I returned to my father's cabinet and removed the leather deed case from the back shelf. Inside were rolled plats, faded easement agreements, and a Blackfield notebook softened by years of use. One line had been underlined twice. East Shore Access is permission, never title. Below it, my father had written, "Check foundational volume before any correction instrument." The next page had been cut out cleanly. My phone buzzed. Cynthia had emailed the full corrective deed. The file history showed it had been uploaded by a document company bearing her brother's last name. I forwarded the file to Hannah and called the document company before Cynthia had time to change anything. A man answered on the third ring. I gave him the instrument number and asked who had ordered the corrective deed. His keyboard stopped clicking. "You'll need to speak with Ms. Vale." "Cynthia Vale?" Another pause. "I can't discuss client matters." "You already told me she's the client." He hung up. I saved the call log, copied the file onto 2 drives, and printed the metadata page. The company was registered to Aaron Vale, Cynthia's brother. That did not prove the deed was false, but it killed the idea that she had innocently discovered it in county records. She had helped create the paper she was now using against me. Hannah called 10 minutes later. "Don't accuse her yet. Get the complete chain she claims to rely on. Every attachment, every board authorization." Cynthia made that easy. Her assistant emailed an invitation to the Silver Pines Clubhouse for 4 that afternoon. The subject line read "Final Resolution Meeting." I arrived early and parked where my dash camera could see the entrance. Through the clubhouse windows, the lake glittered behind Cynthia like staged advertising. A rendering of luxury homes covered one wall. Glass balconies, private docks, stone fire pits. The western shore, land that was still woods. Cynthia sat at the head of a polished conference table. Grant Holloway stood beside the rendering in a navy suit, one hand resting on a silver pointer. He introduced himself as a development partner, not an attorney. That told me the meeting was about money. Cynthia slid a folder across the table. Robert intended the lake to serve the community. This deed corrected an old mapping error. I opened it slowly. Robert's signature sat above the notary block. Only one trustee signature. No sealed survey. What did Silver Pines pay for it? Her smile held. "The transfer resolved historical obligations." "That's not a number." Grant stepped forward. His cologne smelled like cedar and smoke. "Mr. Mercer, fighting this will damage everyone. Home values, pending sales, your own finances." He placed a second document beside the deed. A settlement agreement. $250,000. Confidentiality. I would surrender the ramp keys, dam records, boats, and every commercial agreement connected to the lake. In return, they would hire me as a maintenance contractor. Cynthia folded her hands. "You keep working here. The residents get certainty. Everyone wins." I photographed the offer before closing the folder. "Send me the board vote, the supporting survey, the trust approval, and the complete title chain." Her jaw tightened. "You have the recorded deed." I asked for what supports it. Grant's pointer tapped the Western Shore rendering. Delays have consequences. Outside, tires crunched across the clubhouse lot. I looked through the glass and saw two bank representatives step from a black sedan carrying loan binders. Grant moved to block my view, but not before I read the project name embossed across the top sheet. Holloway Western Shore. Lake Ownership Collateral Review. They were not stealing my lake to satisfy an HOA dispute. They were using it to finance an entire development. Grant saw me reading the loan binder and closed the conference room blinds. Cynthia's expression changed with them. The smile disappeared. She gathered the settlement papers, squared their edges against the table, and told me the offer expired at midnight. "You're confusing access to records with leverage," she said. I stood. "And you're confusing a dock easement with collateral." Grant stepped toward me, but Cynthia raised one finger. She did not argue. She simply opened her phone and sent a message. That silence worried me more than shouting would have. I drove straight to the lake office, copied every photograph and recording to encrypted storage, then scheduled an automatic upload to Hannah. Before leaving, I placed the severed gate chain and Cynthia's laminated notice inside separate clear bags, dated them, and locked them in the steel cabinet. It felt excessive. I did it anyway. At 6:12 the next morning, engines woke me. 3 contractor trucks blocked the eastern access road. A private security SUV sat sideways across the ramp, amber lights turning against the gray dawn. The temporary fence from the day before had become 8-foot steel panels anchored into concrete blocks. Cynthia had not waited for midnight. I parked uphill and began recording. Workers replaced my second lock, while another crew installed cameras facing the workboat and dam path. One man drilled a silver pine sign directly into my gatepost. 2 board members watched from the shoulder with coffee cups in their hands. "Court order," I called. The security supervisor approached, but stopped 10 feet away. "We've been instructed to preserve HOA assets." "By whom?" He looked toward Cynthia. She stood beside Grant's black SUV wearing a red coat, reading from a clipboard as though she were supervising a closing inspection. "Your refusal created an emergency," she said. "Residents have been informed that you may interfere with the reservoir." My phone vibrated. An email from Silver Pines had gone to every homeowner. It called me a hostile former operator with unrestricted access to critical water controls. It warned that I might lower the lake, cancel insurance, or block emergency services. None of it was true, but residents were already arriving. A man shouted that his mortgage depended on lake access. A woman demanded to know whether I planned to drain the water. Someone filmed me from behind the fence, while Cynthia stood silently in the center of the panic she had manufactured. I could have cut their new lock in seconds. Instead, I stepped back. "Keep recording," I told my phone, loud enough for every camera to hear. One contractor carried a pry bar toward the brass medallion beside the ramp. I moved between him and the marker. "That stays." He glanced at Grant, then lowered the tool. As he turned, I noticed a work order clipped to his belt. The authorization line carried a board resolution number and yesterday's date. Cynthia had ordered the takeover before the board members arrived. I zoomed in and captured it. At 9:40, a deputy delivered the emergency petition to my office. By noon, Hannah and I stood before a county judge while Cynthia's attorney displayed the recorded corrective deed and described me as an immediate operational risk. The judge did not award them the lake. He did something almost as damaging. Until the title hearing, I could not restrict existing access, change the water level, remove the HOA's markers, issue new fishing leases, or interfere with security at the eastern ramp. When I returned, Cynthia was waiting behind my locked gate. She lifted the order against the fence. Then her contractor chained my workboat to the dock. The chain around my workboat looked heavier than it was. Cynthia had looped it through the steering wheel around the dock post and sealed it with a bright red security tag stamped Silver Pines Asset Control. Residents stood behind the fence filming while she posed beside the court order. By sunset, the video was on the HOA website. HOA secures community reservoir from disgruntled operator. The next morning, my insurance carrier called. "We can't maintain your current coverage if you no longer control access," the representative said. "Too many operators. Too much exposure around the dam. I still own the lake. I understand your position." Position, not ownership. They gave me 5 business days to restore controlled access or accept suspension. Without coverage, I could not run fishing leases, hire maintenance crews, or operate the workboat. The order already blocked new leases. Now the old ones began calling. One guide canceled his spring contract. Another asked for his deposit back. By noon, $18,000 in expected income had disappeared from my calendar. Cynthia sent residents a polished update that afternoon. She called the court order a victory for community safety and announced supervised weekend access through the eastern ramp. Her photograph showed children holding life jackets beneath the sign drilled into my gatepost. She had turned my restraint into proof that she was right. I drove to the lake office after dark. The room was colder than usual. My father's rain jacket still hung beside the cabinet, but the silence felt wrong without the workboat engine coughing through the walls or his boots scraping concrete. For the first time, I wondered whether I should have cut the lock before the hearing. Not because it would have helped legally, because standing still while strangers chained his boat had felt like betrayal. I set both hands on the desk until the thought passed. Then I worked. Hannah and I compared Cynthia's deed against the trust records line by line. Robert's middle initial was wrong. Piedmont's signature was missing. The survey attachment listed in the legal description did not exist in the county image. I called Ruth Bennett, one of the original Silver Pines homeowners. She answered cautiously. Cynthia says you're trying to erase our lake rights. I'm trying to find out what rights you bought. The next morning, Ruth met me at a diner 3 towns over. She slid a faded closing packet across the table, but kept one hand on it. My husband saved everything, she said. Cynthia told us these pages were outdated. The paper smelled like dust and coffee. The dock agreement granted limited recreational access. No lake ownership. No dam rights. No transfer language. Ruth watched my face. She lied to us, didn't she? I don't know how far it goes yet. That night, someone broke into the lake office. The steel cabinet door had been pried open. Tax folders covered the floor. Mud streaked the concrete beneath the broken window. The leather deed case was gone. My stomach tightened as I checked the cameras. One exterior feed had caught a dark contractor truck leaving at 2:13 a.m. The plate was hidden by mud, but the rear door carried the same Silver Mountain logo from Grant's Western Shore rendering. Then I saw what the thief had missed. My scanner light was still blinking. Every page from the deed case had uploaded automatically before they stole it. The scanner log showed 43 successful uploads before the window broke. I checked every file name against the cabinet inventory, then opened the images one by one. Deeds, easements, tax statements. My father's Blackfield notebook, including the page before the missing sheet and the page after it. The thief had taken paper. He had not taken the record. I copied everything onto 2 encrypted drives, uploaded a second set to Hannah, and printed a checksum report showing when each file had been created. Then I exported the security footage in its original format instead of recording it off the screen. The truck's plate was unreadable, but the Silver Mountain logo matched the branding behind Grant at the clubhouse. That connected the break-in to the development. The stolen deed case connected it to the lake. And the missing notebook page suggested somebody had been searching Robert's files long before they smashed my window. I stopped treating the events as separate. Hannah arrived before sunrise carrying coffee and evidence bags. We photographed the prime marks, measured the broken latch, and sealed the muddy boot impressions beneath clear plastic until the deputy returned. "You're calmer than I expected," she said. "I'm done being surprised." By 8, Miguel Alvarez was standing beside the brass medallion at the eastern ramp with a survey rod over his shoulder. Cynthia's security guard tried to stop us, but the court order allowed inspection. I kept my hands visible and filmed the exchange while Miguel knelt beside the marker. He brushed dirt from the brass with a nylon tool. Tiny stamped characters appeared around its rim. Book 214, page 77. The same phrase my father had shortened in his notebook to foundational volume. Miguel ran a line from the marker toward the eastern drainage corridor, then checked Cynthia's parcel 18B description against county coordinates. His receiver beeped steadily as we walked away from the water, through scrub oak and into a narrow ditch choked with reeds. He planted the rod. "Parcel 18B starts here," he said. The lake shimmered almost half a mile behind us. I looked at Cynthia's map on my tablet. Her deed used the right parcel number, then attached a completely different description, one swallowing the lake, shoreline, dam, and submerged land. Not a typo, a substitution. We verified it twice before Miguel signed anything. At the recorder's office, Evelyn Price pulled the digitized index while I gave her the bookend page reference from the medallion. Her fingers stopped over the keyboard. "This volume isn't online," she said. "It was moved during the archive conversion. Can it be retrieved?" "Not today." She studied the reference again, then lowered her voice. "But Robert Mercer asked about this exact volume before he died." That landed harder than I expected. I kept my face still and asked her to document the retrieval request in writing. Back at the office, James Whitaker confirmed Piedmont had never approved a transfer. Ruth signed an affidavit authenticating her closing packet. Hannah arranged formal requests for the notary log, deed submission data, board minutes, and communications tied to the Western Shore financing. I organized the evidence into 4 columns: ownership, access, fabrication, motive. For the first time, Cynthia's story looked less like a wall and more like stacked boards. Remove the right ones, and the whole thing might fall. At 4:36 p.m., Hannah filed an expedited motion for archival production and preservation of all Silver Pines Lake acquisition records. I watched the confirmation stamp appear on her screen. The counterattack had entered the system. The preservation order went out before sunset. By 9 the next morning, Silver Pines had been formally warned not to alter board minutes, financial records, emails, contractor invoices, or anything tied to the lake acquisition. Cynthia responded by scheduling an emergency membership meeting for that evening. Her notice called it a vote to protect community ownership from outside interference. Hannah read it twice. "She's rushing the loan." Then we let her. That decision put everything I still had at risk. If the homeowners approved the financing and the court refused to intervene, the HOA could bind 40 families to millions in debt backed by a lake it did not own. My insurer's deadline was 2 days away. My canceled leases were already costing me money. One failed hearing could leave Cynthia holding a signed loan agreement while I stood outside my own gate. I arrived at the clubhouse carrying only a thin folder. Every chair was filled. Residents lined the walls beneath glossy renderings of the Western Shore development. Grant stood near the projector with 2 bank representatives. Cynthia sat at the center table beside a stack of ballots and a silver pen. She looked almost relieved when she saw me. "Mr. Mercer has chosen to attend," she announced. "I hope that means he's ready to stop obstructing the community." I took a seat in the back and placed my phone face up on the table. The room had posted notice of audio recording for the official minutes. Cynthia's own camera blinked red above the board. She began with property values, then safety, then children losing access to the lake. By the time Grant displayed the financing numbers, I had become the single obstacle between Silver Pines and prosperity. I let him finish. Then I raised my hand. Cynthia smiled. "Yes, Daniel. Before the vote, will the board identify the instrument that gives Silver Pines authority to pledge the lake as collateral?" She held up the corrective deed. "That recorded instrument, and the board resolution authorizing the acquisition." The room shifted. Cynthia reached beneath her binder and produced a signed resolution. I recognized the number from the work order clipped to the contractor's belt at the ramp. Same number, different date. The work order showed the resolution had existed before the meeting where Cynthia claimed the board approved it. I kept my voice level. "When was that resolution adopted?" "Yesterday afternoon," she said. "Before or after you changed my locks?" Grant leaned toward her, but she ignored him. The board had already reached consensus. "That isn't what I asked." Her fingers tightened around the silver pen. The formal vote occurred after emergency possession was secured. The official camera recorded every word. So did mine. A side door opened. Leonard Pike, the HOA treasurer, stepped inside carrying a banker's box. He did not look at Cynthia. He walked straight to Hannah, who had entered behind him, and placed the box at her feet. Cynthia stood. "What are you doing?" Leonard's face had gone pale. "Preserving records." Grant moved toward the box. Hannah stepped between them. Cynthia struck the table with her palm. "Proceed with the vote." Ballots moved down the rows. Residents marked them under her stare. The bank representatives opened their loan binders. Then Cynthia signed the certification stating that Silver Pines held clear ownership of Mercer Lake and that all board actions had been properly authorized before possession. She pushed the document toward the lender and looked directly at me. "Now," she said, "you have nothing left to stop us." The lender's notary pressed her seal into the page. I heard the metal stamp click. The last missing record now existed. The notary seal was still warm when Hannah placed our emergency filing on the lender's table. "Before those funds move," she said, "you should know the collateral is disputed trust property." Cynthia gave a thin laugh. "We've heard this before." The bank representatives stopped turning pages. Hannah handed them the preservation order, then looked toward the official camera. "You just recorded Ms. Vale certifying clear ownership and prior board authorization. Please preserve that statement with the signed loan package." Cynthia reached for the certification. The notary pulled it away. By 9 the next morning, we were back before the same county judge. Cynthia sat beside Grant with the confidence of someone expecting paperwork to defeat reality. Behind us, Silver Pines residents filled the benches. Ruth sat near the aisle. Leonard held the banker's box on his knees. Cynthia's attorney began with the recorded corrective deed. Hannah began with the owner named on the tax record. Mercer Basin Land Trust, James Whitaker said from the witness chair. He identified himself as Piedmont Heritage Trust Company's representative and confirmed that Piedmont had remained institutional co-trustee since 1999. Did Piedmont approve the transfer of Mercer Lake? No. Did Piedmont sign this deed? No, Cynthia whispered to Grant. Her attorney argued that Robert's signature corrected a mapping error. Hannah placed Ruth's closing packet on the display screen. The words limited recreational dock easement appeared above language denying residents any ownership interest in the lake, dam, shoreline, or submerged land. Murmurs moved through the gallery. Ruth did not look at Cynthia. Then Miguel unfolded his certified survey. Parcel 18B appeared in yellow, a narrow drainage strip east of Silver Pines, less than 3 acres. Mercer Lake lay almost half a mile away. "The parcel number is genuine," Miguel said. "The attached property description is not describing that parcel." The room went still. Cynthia stood. "That survey is new. Robert corrected the boundary years ago." Hannah held up a photograph of the brass medallion beside my ramp. Book 214. Page 77. Evelyn Price identified the marker's reference and the archived foundational trust volume retrieved under court order. The original instrument required both co-trustee signatures and a sealed boundary exhibit for any conveyance. Cynthia's deed had one signature. No sealed survey. The notary log came next. No Robert Mercer acknowledgement existed on the claimed date. Then the submission metadata showed the electronic deed file had been created months after my father died. A woman behind me gasped. Cynthia turned toward the residence. Grant's firm prepared the documents. I relied on professionals. Leonard opened the banker's box. Payment records appeared on the screen. HOA reserves transferred to Cynthia's brokerage, Grant's company, her brother's document firm, and the contractor whose truck my camera captured after the break-in. Then Hannah played the clubhouse recording. Cynthia's voice filled the courtroom. The formal vote occurred after emergency possession was secured. The work order from my ramp appeared beside the backdated resolution. Same number. Earlier date. Then came her 72-hour notice, issued before either one. Her own timeline collapsed in silence. The judge removed his glasses. He declared the corrective deed void, halted the loan, dissolved every restriction against me, and restored the trust's control of the lake and eastern ramp. Then he turned to the clerk. Transmit the complete record to the county prosecutor for investigation into forgery, fraud, and misuse of association funds. The clerk stamped the referral. Cynthia finally stopped smiling. The clerk's stamp had barely dried when 2 investigators entered the courtroom and asked Cynthia, Grant, and Leonard to remain. Leonard stayed seated. Cynthia did not. She reached for her purse, but an investigator stopped her at the aisle and handed her a preservation notice covering her phone, laptop, brokerage records, and HOA accounts. Grant received one too. The document preparer and the contractor were named in separate warrants before the week ended. By Friday, the chain was gone from my workboat. I cut the red Silver Pines asset control tag free, sealed it with the rest of the evidence, and turned the key. The engine coughed twice, then settled into its old low rumble. Across the ramp, residents watched from behind the fence. Nobody raised a phone. My insurer restored full coverage after I submitted the court order and a new access control plan. The canceled fishing guides returned one by one. Some deposits could not be recovered, but the lake was operating again, and the dam inspections resumed under my authority. The steel panels came down next. Contractors removed the HOA cameras, the concrete blocks, and the sign that had called Mercer Lake a community reservoir. I kept the gate post. The bolt holes remained visible beneath fresh paint, for dark circles where Cynthia had tried to turn a lie into a boundary. Silver Pines entered court-supervised management after the reserve accounts were frozen. Leonard turned over the remaining records and helped reconstruct every unauthorized payment. He was not charged. The evidence showed he had resisted the backdated entries and preserved copies before Cynthia removed him. Months later, Cynthia pleaded guilty to forged property filings, misuse of association funds, and conspiracy. Her sentence included time in custody, supervised release, and restitution. Grant settled the civil claims, lost the Western Shore project, and transferred the wetland tract beside it into permanent conservation. Nobody cheered in court. They simply signed what the evidence required. Police recovered my father's leather deed case from the contractor's storage unit. The brass corners were scratched, and mud had dried into the stitching. Inside, beneath the rolled plats, was the missing notebook page. Robert's handwriting crossed it in dark pencil. Brass monument at East Ramp ties physical boundary to Book 214, page 77. Never rely on digital index alone. I read it sitting at his desk with his yellow rain jacket hanging beside me. Then I placed the page in a sealed frame above the cabinet they had broken open. Ruth attended the first community meeting after the court-appointed manager took over. She brought her original closing packet and set it on the table in front of the new board. "We were promised access," she said, "not ownership." That became the foundation of the Mercer Lake Stewardship Agreement. Silver Pines residents kept controlled dock access through clearly defined easements. Fees went into separate accounts for shoreline repair, dam inspections, insurance, and youth water safety classes. No developer could pledge the lake. No HOA officer could alter the agreement without the trust's written approval and a recorded survey. At the eastern ramp, I installed a new gate and placed a second marker beside my father's brass medallion. The first Saturday of summer, children in orange life jackets lined up beside the water while their parents signed safety forms. The air smelled of sunscreen, cedar, and gasoline from the workboat. Cynthia's laminated surrender notice was gone. The lake stayed exactly where my father left it, behind my gate, under my name, and open only by permission.